We have Chip Roy on with us now. Hi, Chip. How are you?
Hey, Glenn. How are you?
I have a lot of stuff to ask you about. First of all, let's start with the UN. What prompted this from you guys, and what is the plan?
Well, first of all, it's not a new concept, obviously, for those of us who hated the United Nations for a long time and believe that it's a colossal waste of money. $12.5 billion of American, both tax dollars and borrowed money that's gone to the UN as recent as 2021, okay, in 1 year. Mike Lee and I were talking about this, so disgusted about what we've seen at the United Nations, their ridiculousness in terms of how they've treated Israel, voting not to condemn Hamas, their ridiculousness of funding Hamas through UNRWA, which is, done in the name of refugees, but ends up funding terrorist entities like Hamas. Their Human Rights Council, which is a complete sham. They put all of the worst human rights violators on it, funding the, China one-child policy. I mean, you can't even begin to do it. And then you just saw the article yesterday that Mike Lee tweeted out. Mike and I, he introduced the Senate version. I introduced the House version to totally just defund the United Nations, like get out. And Mike tweeted out a picture of an article about how all of these UN workers have been raping children in Africa and other places around the world. And look, it's just a organization devoid of soul. They don't believe in Western civilization. They are not our friend. Why do we fund it? It's just a joke, and we shouldn't.
Is this something that you think could gain traction and win?
Well, I mean, not in the instant. I think we need to get really serious about it. I will say, okay, to the credit of the House, I'm pretty, vicious in my condemnation of the failures of House Republicans. But in fairness, right, we're dealing with a recalcitrant Senate that doesn't want to do anything in a White House that's not just incompetent but evil. We passed appropriations bills at our state and foreign operations that would have defunded a lot, not all of it. It wasn't perfect, but it defunded a lot of these terrible things like UNRWA, like the Chinese policy. Mario Diaz-Balart in Florida, he worked with us on that. But it's jammed. It's just sitting in the Senate, right? The Senate won't do anything with it. So we introduced this bill as a standalone, basically to kind of one-up it all and send a message that you have serious members of the Senate and the House saying, wait a minute, we should not be sending $12.5 billion to the United Nations. So, we'll have to keep working the issue, but I know you agree and I know your listeners agree.
Okay, so the next thing is the spending bills and the fact that this defense bill, first of all, if I'm not mistaken, it was yesterday that Lloyd Austin said, if you fail to pass this Ukraine aid bill, U.S. troops on the ground in Ukraine are likely. What kind of threat is that?
Yeah, so let's take them in order, right? You're talking about the supplemental spending bill at the moment, right? That includes on the Democrat side, right? Because the president put it forward. It has a massive amount of spending, over $100 billion, $60 billion additional funding for Ukraine. I think it's $10 or $15 billion of additional spending at the border, which would just be used to process more people, not change the policies. More spending for Taiwan, more spending generally. And so we would oppose that. And yes, in a briefing the other day, the secretary alluded to, saying, if you guys don't do this, effectively, we're going to be committing American troops to war. Now, if you're being less cynical, you'd say his position is that if we don't push back on Putin now, we'll get drawn into a war that involves our men and women in uniform. To which my response is, no, if you keep carrying out your incompetent policies, where you refuse to promote American energy, where you refuse to actually sanction, for example, Iran, you allow Iran to provide oil to China, you take all of the positions that are empowering our enemies, then you say we need to fund a proxy war to stop those enemies, or you're going to send our men and women to war. And oh, by the way, they wanted to draft your daughters, which I proudly stood up and stopped. That's the truth of this administration. So we're going to stand up and stand athwart that. At least conservatives are. And I hope Mike Johnson will keep doing what he's been doing. I mean, I'm critical when I'm critical, but I'm complimentary when I'm complimentary. Mike has sent a strong message that we will not even remotely consider Ukraine funding until the border is secure. I hope he sticks to that. I think we need to question Ukraine spending generally, but I know for certain we shouldn't even mention the word until the border of the United States is secure.
I agree. How's he doing, by the way, so far, Johnson?
Well, Mike, as you know, is a very good friend. He's a very good man. On that point, he's done, I think, a great job on sending over Israel immediately, first day on the job. And that next week, funded with taking money out of the IRS expansion. I think he did a great job. Look, I think he needs to not give in to the pressures of the swamp. The swamp makes they work on the addiction of pressure. Oh my God! If you don't pass FISA by December 31st, the world's going to end.
Right.
And suddenly people are going to end up. We're all going to die. That's how the swamp works. He should resist that. This National Defense Authorization Act, which is a terrible bill. It's not the House bill, which fixed the abortion tourism. It fixed transgender surgeries. It fixed the DEI and woke stuff. It fixed some of the climate change stuff.
That was all thrown out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of that, like 90% of that was thrown out. So the defense bill is bad on its face. Then, now they want to add FISA extension, which, Glenn, for your listeners, means using backdoor foreign intelligence to go after American citizens. We want to end that. We passed a good bill in the Judiciary Committee to end that. But unfortunately, Mike has agreed with Senate Democrats to put a, quote, short-term extension of the existing bill, which allows the spying, until April. And that would actually last until the spring of 25. We oppose it. All of your listeners should tell every single one of your members of Congress and senators to oppose the NDAA that has FISA on it, because if we vote on it next week, we need at least 150 Republicans to stand up and block that bill.
Jeez, do you have 150?
Well, we also may get some Democrats, so it may be a little bit fewer, but I want as many Republicans as we can get, and depending on how many Democrats we get to block it. But they're going to try to pass it on what we call suspension of the rules, which means you need 290 votes. So we need, 140 or so of both Republicans and Democrats to kill it. So we want to get as many Republicans as possible to say, we're not going to jam through a 3,000-page, watered-down, crappy defense authorization that continues the wokeification of the military instead of a mission-first military, driving down morale, driving down recruiting, and then, oh, by the way, continue the FISA spying regime, which has been abusing power to spy on Americans. We should stop that. We have conservatives that have good bills. We're advancing. We just passed it out of the Judiciary Committee on a bipartisan basis. That is what we should be advancing over to the Senate.
Tell me about Tommy Tuberville, because I think he's a hero. He stood and stood and stood and stood, and damn near no Republicans stood with him. And he was just been bashed, and he finally said, okay, tell me what happened here.
Well, Coach Tuberville, Senator Tuberville, is a good man. I've gotten to know him well. Funny enough, his legislative director is a very good friend of mine and my roommate when I'm in D.C. Look, Coach Tuberville is someone who stood up on the side of life like he said he would do, unlike a lot of Republicans that run on being pro-life, and then when the battle faces them, they run away, right? I mean, the other senator from Alabama touts herself as being Miss Pro-Life, but did she go down and support Coach Tuberville? No. A whole bunch of other senators, I can go through a list, that didn't stand up. Mike Lee was down there, God bless him. Roger Marshall went down there, but not that many went down and supported Coach Tuberville when he went to the floor and would object. And by the way, Glenn, all he was saying was we should vote on these confirmations in the Defense Department. That's it. That's all he was demanding. And making us do that because he said, guys, if you're going to continue to advance an unlawful policy to have taxpayers fund abortion tourism at the Department of Defense, I'm going to make you do the work of getting these things done through votes. I'm sorry that he backed down last week. I wish he'd have held firm a little longer. This is the same issue that is in the National Defense Authorization Act. We fixed it in the House. We should force the Senate to address it. But instead, Republicans are about, if we don't stop them, Republicans are going to move a defense bill that does not address the abortion issue, that does not address transgender surgeries, that does not address climate change, that does not sufficiently address diversity, equity, inclusion garbage, that does not sufficiently restore people that lost their jobs for COVID, and adds FISA spying extension. In what world should we do that? Coach Tuberville did a great job. We should finish the job now.
I've got about 70 seconds here for this answer.
Yep.
The Hunter Biden indictment, is it going anywhere? Also, the impeachment, is it going anywhere?
On Tuesday in the House Rules Committee, we will be taking up, and I serve on the Rules Committee, a impeachment inquiry vote, which we intend to take to the floor, and I hope and believe will pass off the House floor. Now, we have a couple of members who are still a little wishy-washy, but we hope to get it there. If we can do that, that's the additional tools that we need to get more information and force the Biden administration to stop their obstruction, that's what it is, of our seeking the truth. Of what we all know is that money flowing through Hunter was flowing through Hunter to Joe Biden, we believe. Well, we got to go, get more information. But certainly in a conspiracy with Joe Biden, while enriching his son using foreign actors to do it, to the detriment of our national security and well-being. And so Hunter, of course, now you asked about the indictments. The indictments that were brought down yesterday, they seem fairly significant with respect to the tax laws that were violated.
Correct.
He was writing off hookers. He was writing off sex clubs. He was writing off, any number of things you can't do. And so I haven't studied the indictments. I've looked at the summaries. They seem to be significant. But remember, they walked away and they let the statute of limitations run on some very, very significant tax violations from 2014 and 15 when Biden was vice president. We believe that was intentional. We want to seek the truth on that. So we're going to keep running as much as we can with the tools we have. Jamie Comer and Jim Jordan have done a good job. I hope every Republican will support this inquiry that we vote out on Tuesday.
I have to tell you, thank you for the handful of people that are around you and Mike Lee and others that are actually moving the ball or trying to. I appreciate every day you guys are in that cesspool so we don't have to be. Thank you for everything.
Well, Glenn, we can't do it without you. Merry Christmas to all your listeners. Maybe I'll talk to you before Christmas, but I'm not going to stop. I barely have a voice right now, but I don't give a damn. We got to save this country for our kids, Glenn. Those men that sat in the foxholes in Bastogne in 1944, freezing to death so that we could live free. We shouldn't adjourn next week if we haven't done our dang job. That's my position.
You call anytime you need anything next week. Anytime you just call in. Thank you so much, Chip. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Glenn.